US President Donald Trump is at the Vatican for a meeting with Pope Francis. They are expected to talk about immigration, refugees, interfaith relations and climate change. Trump arrived in Rome on Tuesday, kicking off the European leg of his first foreign tour since taking office. Our Washington editor James Bays joins me live now from Rome. Hi, James. So this is his first ever meeting for Donald Trump to meet Pope Francis. How do you think they're going to get on?
Well, we've already seen pictures of the two of them, and I think you should perhaps not read too much into the body language when you see these pictures, because obviously this is a formal meeting and it's not really a place for jollity. But certainly they looked a little awkward, a little stiff, these two, as they met for the first time. They are very different characters, complete polar opposites when you look at their background, at their style and at their policies. The Pope, of course, is or was a Jesuit priest who was very humble, dealing with the poor. That's how he made his name. Of course, Donald J. Trump, before he was president, was the brash businessman from New York. You couldn't really get any more different from that. And the differences on policy, I think, are important. I don't think they're going to be raised again here, because I think each side knows the other's position, and I don't think they want to have a public row over this. But we know that during the election campaign, Pope Francis questioned Trump's comments on immigration, saying that anyone who builds walls and not bridges when it comes to migrants perhaps couldn't call themselves a Christian, and Trump at the time said such comments were disgraceful. So it's that backdrop which makes this a little difficult, but having said that, Pope Francis meets many foreign leaders. There's a way that these things are done, and of course the President of the United States and the White House does the same.
Okay.
So a formal meeting, and I don't think those differences are going to show in public.
Now, James, we're looking at some of the live pictures now coming out of the Vatican, where President Trump has just finished his meeting with Pope Francis. He's been joined now by his daughter, Ivanka Trump, and Jared Kushner, the son-in-law, as well as his wife, Melania Trump. It seemed like the meeting was relatively short, actually. How do you think journalists would be reading into that?
I don't think we read anything into the length of it, because this was carefully planned in advance. We knew the length of it, and it's the length that we were given on the schedule. If it had suddenly been cut short, then we would have been worried about that. But no, that exactly according to time. The Pope has finished, because there are pilgrims coming to the Vatican today, and he must greet all of them, and that happens very soon. So the normal business of the Vatican goes on. The business for President Trump is a tour of the Sistine Chapel, and then to meet the Vatican Secretary of State. Remember, the Vatican clearly is the home of all Catholics. It also happens to be the smallest country in the world, so it does have a political role, and he's meeting the man who leads the political side of things in the Vatican. He'll then meet later on the President of Italy on a short visit to Vatican City and to Italy, and then flying off to NATO for a short visit there and meeting with some EU leaders, and then on to the G7. So quite a lot still on his plate for President Trump going forward. And some experts I've spoke to said even though in the Middle East he was dealing with really serious issues like Syria and the Middle East peace process, this could be the more problematic end of the trip for Donald Trump, because in the Middle East everyone was trying to please him. Here there are European leaders who really don't agree with him, particularly on climate change.
Climate change, also the issue of building the Mexican wall and Syrian refugees as well, James.
Sorry, I'm very loud traffic behind me here. I think you mentioned the wall. Clearly,
yes.
Yeah, the wall is a difficult area, I think, when it comes to a Latin American pope who has said very strongly that refugees and migrants should be treated as human beings, not just as statistics. That's certainly what he said when he made the first ever address to Congress by a pope, and I think it explains those comments that he made during the election campaign. It's a key area of difference, but on this occasion we're not going to get public comments on this from the Pope. So I think they've agreed to disagree. They may well have had a discussion about this in private away from the cameras, but I don't think we're going to see some sort of spat as we saw during the election campaign on this occasion.
And we're now looking at some live pictures of the Pope and Donald Trump going through the gift exchange right now.
Yes, I'm afraid I can't see the live pictures, but this again is what happens on these trips. There is formalities, and among the formalities when you go and visit the Pope, as leaders have done for centuries, you come bearing gifts just to show the friendship between these two leaders, a religious leader, the leader of the Catholic faith, and the President of the United States. Clearly the Pope also a political leader too. And this is just diplomatic protocol, this sort of gift exchange at the end of the actual visit with the Pope. But as I say, this isn't the end of the visit to the Vatican or here to Italy beyond the Vatican, and then still pretty extensive meetings for President Trump going forward. Pretty grueling schedule, in fact, I can tell you as a reporter trying to keep up with the Pope. With the President. Of course, he's on Air Force One, but we follow in a charter plane, and it's pretty grueling, and we've still got quite a bit to go. Remember that President Trump is a bit younger than the Pope. The Pope 80 years old, but President Trump 71 in the next couple of weeks. So pretty grueling schedule for a man of his age. And I spoke to some experts in DC, some who'd worked for previous administrations, who said they were somewhat surprised that they were taking the President on his first ever international visit, on a visit that was lasting 9 days, that was going to two different parts of the world, the Middle East and Europe, with a number of different stops and a number of different international summits, because there actually were two summits that took place in Riyadh. And the end of the trip, there's a NATO summit and there's a G7 summit. The number of leaders President Trump is meeting on this trip, I haven't counted them, but there's probably 50 or so.
James, how significant is it for US presidents to visit the Vatican, and how do you think that's viewed from people there currently in Rome? What's been the reaction?
Well, clearly it's important, I think, to the Catholics that live in the United States. It's important to the Catholic community around the world to see the interaction with this religious leader and the President of the United States. The White House certainly saying that they wanted to interact with three of the world's main faiths, and that's why they went to Saudi Arabia, which is a country that has two of the holiest places in Islam, why they went then to Jerusalem, the old city of Jerusalem, clearly important to Christians as the place, and he went there, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Jesus Christ was buried and then rose again after being crucified, and also clearly important with the Western Wall to Jews and the Al-Aqsa Mosque to Muslims, and then here to the home of a part of the Christian faith, Catholicism, to the Vatican, this small city-state. It starts just the other side of the road behind me, small city-state within the state of Italy, a small city-state, just to give you the geography, about the size of a golf course. Smallest country in the world.